Well, hello, everyone. My name is Katherine Autin, and this is a new podcast called Women Empowering Women and Girls. And there is a purpose behind this podcast. We are doing a series of interviews of amazing women in the Kentucky community who have made amazing, I have to say, major impacts in their communities, but also as leaders in the world. And so today I have a wonderful woman who's in Kentucky, Heather French Henry. We'll get a little bit more detail about her later, but thank you and so welcome to you.
It's great to be here. Thank you. And what a timely subject to be doing podcasts for and on.
So today is February 20th, 2026. And in March, we are going to be celebrating International Women's Day on March 8th. And I am a member of the board of directors of the United Nations Association for the Kentucky division. And I've been empowered as chair of the brand new Women's Committee to find ways to empower women and girls in Kentucky. But all of these interview podcasts will be available to the world. So I am so excited that we are able to do this. It is my distinct honor through these podcasts to speak to women in Kentucky who are generously sharing their journeys in how they have been and are making positive impacts and influence in their communities and the world. And they're empowering women and girls and inspiring them with unique stories of how they've met personal, business, and community challenges with their own unique visions to create a more equitable, safer, and inclusive world with reimagined leadership roles and intergenerational mentorship, which is really important, and engagement. So these women truly encompass the role models that are needed to empower and, as Heather French Henry told me, embolden and inspire women and girls globally. So I'm so happy to introduce Heather French Henry. She is one of the accomplished Kentucky global leader strategist who was a trailblazer as a trained designer, a military veteran advocate, and whose extraordinary work bridges women's empowerment, public service, and systems innovation. That's quite a mouthful. It's amazing. So, thank you for giving me some of your valuable time to share with the world your journey, your vision for your communities, and for helping women and girls in Kentucky and globally. So, I'm going to share with everyone here your bio. So, forgive me because this might take a few minutes, but you have done such amazing things in this world. So, as Miss America in 2000, she earned her education through the organization's scholarship program and began a career focused on expanding access, visibility, and structural support for underserved communities. She later served as commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Veteran Affairs and as a member of the Kentucky Commission on Military Affairs. She recognized unique challenges faced by women veterans, and it led her to the hiring of Kentucky's first women veterans coordinator and was an early national voice highlighting the growing crisis of homelessness among women veterans. And that's very, very key because nobody was actually seeing that. Thank you. Her advocacy has consistently centered on visibility, structural reform, and equitable access to resources. Trained as a designer, Heather spent 7 years working in manufacturing and product development in China, gaining firsthand experience in global supply chains. That's a lot of work, cross-cultural leadership, and international business systems. That experience shaped her approach to leadership as solution-based and systems-driven, an approach she now applies across public service, nonprofit development, and organizational strategy. Through her work with the influential Leader Agency, ILA, She now advises women leaders and entrepreneurs on how to articulate their vision, which is absolutely critical, strengthen their public voice, and build brands that carry depth, credibility, and long-term impact. Her approach centers on narrative strategy, helping women move beyond visibility into meaningful influence. I hope that means getting them on boards. She also leads the Heather French Foundation for Veterans, curates the Rosemary Clooney House Museum, and works with global game changers to cultivate resilience and civic leadership, which I love that, in children from pre-K through fifth grade. Her work reflects a belief that empowered women, resilient service members, and prepared children are foundational to stable societies. You have done so much, and I love that you've given me time to interview you today because there are so many that only know bits and pieces of your background. And for you to be able to tell the world, they can't see you right now, but you've got a great big smile on your face. So thank you. There is so much that you can share about your world. And so, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a few questions that will maybe help people think about what they can do in their own communities to empower and embolden. I love that word. Women and girls. I'm going to keep using that. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. No, it's great to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity, certainly to tell a little more in depth of the story that I have over the last 25 years, especially what I've built since Miss America, since college. And like you said, most people see the surface level, they see a title, and they don't know the intricate work that it takes and how multifaceted we all are, especially as women. I think we thrive on that. So this is now that women and children's affairs, not that it hasn't always been a global discussion, but now we're at a precipice. It's reaching a boiling point. This is more critical than ever. And I have two daughters who are 22 and 24. So always happy to engage in a conversation like this.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know the audience who's listening is like glued to this, waiting to hear your answers to some of these. But I would love it. Some of the things we talked about before we started this podcast interview, you were talking about this new program that you put together, Global Game Changers. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't found Global Game Changers. One of my friends, Jan Helson, who was owned a company called Golden Foods, which was a global manufacturing company, sold the company here in Louisville and decided she wanted to leave a legacy. And I love when women in their second act or in a new season of life decide not to just retire to a beach somewhere, but decide to create legacy projects. And she had been good friends with David Novak, who was the former president of Yum Brands. He had since retired, created a middle and high school leadership curriculum. But where Jan really saw the workforce failing was really in social skills, behavioral management. And she realized that if we're missing that early childhood intervention area, by the time they hit middle and high school, they've already created bad habits that are hard to break. And she really did a deep dive with teachers, not only here locally in Louisville, Kentucky, but also nationwide, and created this amazing curriculum called Global Game Changers. And it's a pre K through fifth grade educational nonprofit. The entire curriculum for character development and leadership is free. And she wants it to be free for all time. So we're fully funded through the David Novak Leadership Foundation, which is brilliant because teachers and schools, educators nationwide, groups should have access to free resources that are fully developed. I mean, if we're not being able to support our teachers who are teaching our children and creating future generations, then what are we doing? And when I hit the
Absolutely.
pandemic,
And
yeah.
and I can't agree with you more on that. I really worry about all of the funding that's being pulled back to a point where the teachers are not just hamstrung in their financial and funding for just keeping the classrooms with their books and papers and
Mm-hmm.
whatever they need, but they're also their programs, important programs that are being just slashed. So
teachers
it's
are
very
seeing
frustrating.
teachers are seeing some huge obstacles when it comes to behavioral issues in classrooms. Our homes are quite different than they've ever been before, where children are coming from, and so when they're coming into school not able to regulate their behaviors and their emotions, teachers are finding it hard to get to those academics, of which they are, it's mandatory that they get through, and being able to provide them some data proven curriculum that moves the needle, that is fun, that's engaging, that's free, and that's supported is so critical. We were just at the American Association of School Administrators national meeting in Nashville. And you see superintendents and principals, this is like one of their number one concerns, aside from safety, of course, here in the United States, which is a daunting issue, no doubt, but behavioral
Yes.
management and getting kids to believe. So even since my Miss America days, I've always said, you can throw as much money as you want to at programming and services, but if you cannot teach a child to believe in themselves, they will never break the cycle. It will never change. And so with Global Game Changers, we have a superpower equation called my talent plus my heart equals my superpower. In essence, we are teaching children how to identify their own unique talents. It doesn't have to be figure skating, it doesn't have to be an Olympic sport, which is all great, but it can be something as talking, as drawing, listening, and then to partner with something that they care about. And then how do we create something unique with them that then changes? It doesn't have to be globally profound, but it can be, hey, in my classroom, or maybe at home, or maybe at my grandparents' nursing home. So we're teaching them to be that they are and they can be vital citizens within their community and creating change. Kids are not jaded. They know no impossibilities, which is great.
I think everything you've said, I agree with. I come from a background. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm not from Kentucky. I've been here since 1991, so this is my home. But my degree's in international studies and cross-cultural training, and one of the key things that I want to do is to teach cross-cultural training in schools because there's a part of assumptions that people make
Mm-hmm.
about each other that interferes with them being leaders, with interferes with them learning and exchanging ideas. And so I love this whole concept of the global game changers. I want to thank you for being involved with that. And I would like to find out more, maybe in some ways, because I'm in the second part of I'm 70 and my husband just passed. And so I am redesigning my life. It's why I'm
Sure.
involved with the United Nations. And I'm also a Parkinson's expert and board certified patient advocate. So I'm also still in that arena, but it's part of what we have to do. I hope
Mm-hmm.
as more and more women age that we find ways to give back to our communities and not go sit by a beach. I'm not
Well,
saying you
it's
can't go sit by a beach,
right,
but
absolutely. Well, I think the whole point we're living now, or the idea we're living now, is that you can create a life that you don't have to escape, and you can take your vacations and you can take your time off when you need it, but that your work becomes so meaningful in your second act that you're not running away from it. You actually love
right,
it. And women,
exactly.
as we hit a certain age, society of yesteryear told us that, our second act was over. But I look at species like elephants and I go, oh my gosh, the older women are the matriarchs of of their whole tribe. And you go, wait a minute, we need to recreate the narrative of what it means to be. And, Gen Xers, I will say this for us, we're pretty emboldened, and we are ready to speak up and speak out. And I love that for us, certainly. But anybody can go on globalgamechangers.org and sign up in the portal, and then you'll get a chance to do a deep dive in our curriculum. We also have wonderful separate assets for like 9/11, a very age appropriate lesson. And this is the 25th anniversary for that. So we really feel like we've built a really comprehensive set of activities and curriculum for that as well. You can find that at the website, or you can actually go to 911lesson.org to find out more about it.
That's awesome. So one of the things that you've done is you work both in public policy,
Mm-hmm.
but you worked in international manufacturing. And I
Yeah.
actually had an international jewelry design company. I designed sterling silver and hand enameled and sold it internationally. So I bought things from China and others. So, how has your global experience kind of shaped your understanding of leadership and systems that have changed?
It's always a great idea to be able to step outside your own world, right? So you don't become too ethnocentric, where this is all that will ever be. And I often, when I talk to children, it's about moving from me to we. And nothing moves that needle quite like when you travel abroad and you do a deep dive into international manufacturing. So, years ago, when we got out of politics, specifically my husband, he got out of office, I dove headfirst back into design and I started designing clothing and women's evening wear. 90% of women's evening wear is made in Chaozhou, China. They are experts at it. I was not one that was raised to shy away from global manufacturing. In fact, I think that the great myth is that we should have everything based on our soil. That labor as a seamstress, as a pattern maker, is never coming back to the United States, and they are experts at what they do. And when I saw more of a global view in traveling over there so much, designing the product, getting the samples ready, talking to the pattern makers, talking to the factory owners. I actually would go and talk to the workers as well. I wanted to make sure their living conditions were great. And there were so many myths that fear mongering, even around that, that I had to dispel myself. And I'm a person who wants to go straight to the source, and I don't listen to a lot of rhetoric. I want to find out facts and statistics. So being able to be over there firsthand, doing a deep dive was great. And when you watch them do their manufacturing process, it's done so differently than how we're taught here on assembly. And one person can do 80 evening gowns in a month or more. And the way that they structure their assembly is quite beautiful. So, of course, they, just to break it down into just the clothing part, they've got people who do the pattern, people who do the beading and cutting, and then the beading, and then the people who actually do the sewing part of it. They're creating that whole garment, but they're doing, like, if I had 100 size 6 evening gowns, they're sewing all the left seams of each one of those, and then going back, and so that at the end of the month they're just doing the hem. Now that sounds really like superficial, but it's the process of which they've looked at how can we generate more and how can we streamline the system to be able to produce more. Now, of course, that is, quantity, no doubt, but you can apply
Right.
that same sort of thought process in a lot of systems. Like, how do we break down where we want to go? How do we streamline the process? And where are we wasting time? And so, where they were
That's the
wasting
thing
time
that's,
is moving from,
yeah.
like, person to person to person instead
Where
of
are
having the
the
one.
blocking points, the stop gaps? And
Right.
that's something you're right. As a business owner for 43 years, there are so many places where there's a gap, but
hmm
nobody has closed or found a way to close that gap. So there's always this, what I call a pitfall in business, that
hmm
if you don't know how to get around it, you fall in it. It's one of the
Oh,
things
that's
I try to
absolutely right.
teach as a business owner. So, one of the things that really interests me with you is you were so instrumental in elevating women's veterans within our Kentucky system. What what did it take for you to shift that institutional blind spot that we're talking about?
Well, first and foremost, as a non veteran, I want to let people know my father is a disabled Vietnam veteran, had co occurring issues with substance abuse and PTSD. And my uncle became a homeless veteran who was also a Vietnam veteran, went into a veteran specific rehab program in Florida, and came out eventually as a counselor there, and just, retired as counselor of the year. So I saw two pivotal people in my life able to turn their lives around through government assisted programs. So that's sort of like government quasi community partnership. And when I became Miss America, and I took on Homeless Veterans Initiative first, and then got more comfortable telling my whole story, which at 24 years old, when you're thrust onto the national stage, I was brave, certainly, but I wasn't brave enough to tell the whole story. And then about 3 months into my year, I realized the more I exposed about our trials and tribulations as a military family, the more it
Mhm.
impacted and made a difference. So when I opened up the discussion, and then I too did a deep dive into why we weren't talking about women veterans specifically in the homeless population, it became clear to me that we were generalizing the population too much. I mean, these were in the days when, HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development, did not want to even section out homeless veterans as a separate part of the homeless population, even though there had been significant data to prove that homeless veterans, majority of the reasons why they are where they are have a lot to do with their military service and the ripple effects of military service.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
we needed to create separate systems of support, separate systems of resources. And that's where, these stand downs that were created around the country that started in California and morphed all over, then encourage veteran specific programming. And now, today, 25 years later, we've got even veteran treatment courts, which actually take nonviolent offender veterans and instead of putting them in jail, put them into veteran specific programming, and it builds accountability because we now know that that type of structure leads to success. We have spent billions of dollars training these individuals, and to give up on them and just generalize them into
Yeah.
a general population is a travesty. And that's how I started looking at women veterans. And I started, instead of even just asking, like, what can we do first, I started thinking, why are we missing the marker here? And a lot of it had
Hmm.
to do with women not identifying themselves as a veteran. And we even went back to the very question on paperwork at a homeless facility or homeless shelter or facility and started
Hmm.
saying, okay, instead of saying, are you a veteran on that intake? How about reframing the question? Have you had prior military service? That
Perfect.
totally reframes and shifts the mindset for someone who may not understand if they are or if they aren't a veteran. And for women,
That is perfect. And
it
that's
is.
one of the things, though, is you have to get to the succinct descriptions for people
Hmm.
to really get it sometimes. So I thank you for that. One of the things that I find interesting, and you can tell me more about this because, again, I'm not from Kentucky. I don't know your entire history, but I believe you were helping women find homes. Is that correct?
We actually, when I became commissioner, we created our first women veterans coordinator, LaWanda Knuckle, who
Hmm.
was amazing. We actually
Hmm.
then partnered or helped one of the newer organizations from it called Lady Vets Connect, and they actually helped women who were homeless to have a facility or a home to move into. That's where we
Hmm.
get into that lack where women veterans who are homeless, there's a higher incidence of sexual trauma, of military sexual trauma, or even outside the military. And you cannot house them in a male dominated facility and expect that part to heal. So it takes
Mm-mm.
extra money, it takes extra resources, even though their numbers are fewer that we know of than male homeless population. That still, we still have a duty and we still have a responsibility to provide them access and equitable housing and programming. And so Lady Vets Connect here in Kentucky was able to do that. And we were really proud. I was proud as commissioner and chair of the Kentucky Veterans Program Trust Fund to be able to fund part of that.
Yeah, I remember reading about it, just bits and pieces. And I thought that is so needed. But the thing is, with women veterans, as you were saying, many of them have been sexually abused,
Mm-hmm.
either in the military or outside the military, as many women are. I was. There is a whole world out there that's additional emotional stress. So you've got the military service, PTSD, or if you have Parkinson's or whatever it is, and on top of that, you have the emotional stress from being violated. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So I wanted to thank you for that specifically. So I'm thinking, in terms of your leadership, what advice would you give to women who are trying to be leaders in their own countries or their own communities or even in their homes in this male dominated system that we live in.
Well, I certainly have grown up in a male dominated and worked in a male dominated field of military and veterans. It's interesting to me. I've never felt lack when I walked into that room because I walked in understanding my own unique talents and the credible work that preceded me. It does take, and you do have to realize, while it may not be fair, one of my business mentors said, Heather, sometimes it's just the way it is that you realize, as like, even as Miss America, I realize that if that's in my bio, that's an instant obstacle to some people. So I know there's something I've got to overcome. So if I want to play the game, if I want to make the dent, if I want to make the difference or create the difference, I already have identified here are maybe a couple of obstacles I'm going to have to learn how to navigate in any room. And a lot of that takes building the credible work even ahead of time, or making sure that you are part of projects that are credible and viable, that are making a difference, and then owning your narrative. So now when I walk into a room full of veterans, while they're still probably, now we're 25 years out of Miss America and I'm no longer the commissioner of KDVA, I'm sure there are veterans who may not really know all that I've done, but they know that I've done something, certainly,
Right.
and the way I'm introduced and the people I associate with help to build that credibility. So you're building that foundation of credibility. And I've spent years of people getting to know me and hopefully like me. And then when they get to know and like you, then they get to trust you. So I haven't disappeared. I have maintained consistency in my involvement in my message. And that type of consistency builds clarity for people. So they're not confused about where you stand and who you are. So for women, we just have some unique challenges that you're just sometimes going to have to overcome on a daily basis. I'm not saying it's fair, but I'm saying I'm not going to let it keep me out of that room.
There you go. I love hearing that because I believe, yes, consistency. And like I said, I've been a business owner 43 years, and
Hmm.
most of the things I've been in business doing were a man's world,
Hmm.
retail, jewelry design. That was not a women's world when I
Which is
started it in
shocking. People don't realize
1982.
that.
No,
Most
I
salespeople on the road for evening wear are men. And I'm
I
like,
had
what?
people at trade shows. I remember in Florida one time, I was doing a trade show and I had my jewelry designs all, I had designed a display case and everything, all set for, all in one, ready to go to sale, put it on a display thing and sell it. Well, my husband was helping me and he was at the front and somebody came up to him and said, "I want to hire you." And he said, "Well, you need to talk to my boss." And he pointed to me. And they went, "What?" And he said, "She owns the company. This is her company. This is her vision. And she does the design, she does the creation." And they're like, looking at him like he's outer space. And this is where I think a lot of us have overcome some of this over the years. But when I started my business in 1982, are you kidding me? There were no women mentors.
Right.
The only thing there was the SBA, and that's still there, and it's great. But at that time, and so a lot of us have overcome things, but we're also finding that the leadership, we really have to be on boards. We have to be in the rooms where decisions are being made. And everything that you've been doing and building through your life, being a part of that and stepping into your authenticity, that's what we need to teach and embolden other women and girls to do, because if we are not in those rooms where decisions are made, we are left out. Our perspective is left out. And so I think, thinking about all of this, how do we change these systems that are already established? Is it only being on boards, or is it, I know through podcast, I've influenced a lot of people, but the bottom line is, what is it that we as women can do to change some of these established systems?
First and foremost, look around you and see what's the low-lying fruit around you that you're already involved in, you're already touching. So many of my clients through ILA, oftentimes we're looking for extra. we're saying, oh, we've got to try something new or we've got to move into a new path. When, if you look at the talents that you have, the skill set you have, and you look at what's immediately around you in your village, in your community, there's so much that you can maybe that you're already involved in that you could just elevate a little bit. And then also that mentorship, through the Miss America opportunity, we have created several levels of mentorship. In the old days, of course, it was just the young women who are competing at that Miss level. And I loved it because I graduated debt free with the scholarship that I gained, and it gave me a platform for real change and legacy. But then we created a teen division. And then we also now have this Little Sisters program where now we have encompassed like from tiny tots to like 3 years old. They're not competing, but they're part of this Little Sisters program where we do community-based activities with them. They're on board with our teens and our miss. And so we've created this sort of intergenerational aspect of service, sisterhood, success, scholarship, which are the 4 points of our crown. And to me, now that I'm seeing some of these little sisters of yesteryear coming up through the system, I mean, the amount of change that they perpetuate is amazing. I even look at my youngest daughter. Now, my eldest daughter's in medical school, so she's already going to be a trailblazer, no doubt. And then my youngest daughter just did a partnership with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office on a gun lot giveaway because suicide
Oh,
prevention is
wow.
her platform. She competes in the Miss Kentucky system. And so she had seen early on from being raised around me and that whole Miss America opportunity possibility that I mean, I didn't help her do this project. She did it herself. And so teaching young women, little girls, that they can start that process as early as they want to start that process. There is no threshold they have to cross where it's like all of a sudden, hey, now that I'm 10 or now that I'm 15 or now that I'm eligible to vote. I think a lot of people feel like you have to be eligible to vote to make a difference, and that simply is not true.
So that's where we go back to emboldening and
Mhm.
empowering and inspiring because we have to start young. And as women, and I know a lot of college women are working toward this goal of trying to teach young girls that you can do so much more than you actually believe or even know
Mm.
about. And by collaborating and with your program, I mean, this global game changers, I'm just in love with this idea. I keep thinking this is what we need in our schools. I don't
Mm.
know how many schools are incorporating that into their systems, but I believe from everything you've said, and I can't wait to share what you have just told me with the UN Women's Group,
Oh,
because
great.
this is something we're all talking about. How do we start young?
Hmm.
Like we need to think birth to death.
Oh,
How
there's no
how do
doubt. Even
we
in my veterans work, going into elementary schools and asking the questions, do you know a veteran? And 9 times out of 10, they would say, oh, it's a doctor who takes care of animals. And it was shocked me. It was funny, but it shocked me. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Oh
we've
no.
left them. Yeah, we've left them out of the conversation.
Oh my gosh.
And if we don't bring them into the conversation, what is that misperception they will have of the world because they're watching TV, they're hearing us speak.
Right.
So,
Right.
why not be intentional about what it is and what things mean and bring them into that conversation so they're more educated? I think about the way I raise my daughters, and they're strong, they're vibrant, they're emboldened, they speak their mind, they understand misinformation, getting correct information, and I want them to be brave and alert and engaged. But I
Right.
intentionally, I live that and I tell that to them, which means that we have very open conversations. And I was not always able to have that because of just the nature of what you were and were not allowed to talk about when I was raised. And I think from a small rural community, there are a lot of people like that with their families and their parents. But I don't ever want
Yeah.
there to be a point where my girls can't come to me and talk to me about anything. I want
Well,
super
the
engaged
taboo,
conversation.
yeah, there's the taboo discussions in
Hmm.
some families that just never happen. But it's up. I believe, and I believe from everything you've told me and that you've accomplished, is that the rest of the community, as we call, you know, let's talk about, let's go to our entire society and say, if we're not getting it at home, then other women and
Right.
girls need to empower, inspire, and embolden each other. And the only way that I believe truly that, and that's why I'm doing these podcasts, is if others hear stories of women and girls who have overcome
Hmm.
challenges or done incredible things that nobody would have ever guessed that they, I mean, just in my life, and I'm sure in yours, I was very shy and quiet in high school, but when I went overseas and lived, you can't be quiet and shy and survive. And
Right, that's exactly right.
I had to come out of my shell. I had to learn to live in a
Hmm.
speak different languages, and I loved it. And it really emboldened me
Hmm.
to take on a whole different life that I now love because I love speaking, as you can tell.
Well,
But
it's
I
interesting.
also,
I had like Rosemary Clooney reached out to me. She was the second phone call I received after winning Miss America. And I had been raised with the Clooney family in Augusta and Maysville, Kentucky area, but I had not known Rosemary. And literally, she understood that, hey, here is a young lady from my home area. She's now being thrust into this crazy, like, entertainment world, and I want to make sure that she has resources that I didn't have, or I can help her build a foundation. And she called me once a week, every week during that year. We got a chance to perform
wow.
together. That's why we actually now own her house in Augusta,
Oh,
Kentucky, and why
wow.
we have created this wonderful project so her legacy lives on, because that's what she did for me. And that's what
Wow.
each one of us
That
need to do for
That's
other young
unbelievable.
women.
I
Hmm.
had no idea. But it's people like her and the
Hmm.
rest of us, the whole group. We all, as women, particularly in my generation, I'm 70. So I'm trying to share the challenges that I overcame. And like I said, living overseas was one of the key
Hmm.
ways that woke me up, if you will,
It
to
does,
not
doesn't it?
just
In a way
the
nothing
other
else can.
world. I grew up in another world too. I grew up
Hmm.
with a father who was famous. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He was on TV. People knew him. I had that to overcome. It was
Hmm.
very different because people expected me to be some big whatever. That's not what
Right.
my
Your
dream.
narrative gets made for you instead of you creating
It
your
was not
own.
my dream to be famous or to make $1 million, or my dream was to help people, and I'm still doing that. I am pushing my passion just like you are forward, but also sharing it so others can catch that. I don't know how to call it. It's like you can catch that fever of, oh
Oh,
yeah,
sure
I
you
can do
can. The
that
spirit
too.
of the thing. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, it's very exciting. So I want to ask you one more question, and I think it's really important for us to consider with International Women's Day coming up. This is being recognized in over 100 countries, which is pretty amazing. And I think that whenever I think of that day coming up, I think of women who've mentored me uh, way past, like in my 40s, even. I have to look back and say, as what can we do to empower and embolden those girls who want to make a difference in their communities or in the world? What would you say would be the key thing? I think your group,
Oh my.
Global Game Changers, is like the whole shamil to me.
Well,
And
here is, I'm going to bring up maybe a couple of things. Of course, I was a Girl Scout for 12 years, and I think reintroducing some of those really staple programs back into their lives globally, because Girl Scouts is international, would be phenomenal. And I think that that needs to grow even more exponentially. But I'm going to address the elephant in the room. We as women can keep talking about this till we are out of our breath. We have to get men on board with this conversation of growing
yes, that's
strong women.
I agree. And there are men. In fact, the one thing that's interesting, and people don't know this, but the United Nations Women Affinity Group has women and men as a part of it. The UN women's groups have men
Hmm.
com, com they're completely involved, and they are supporting the terms and the terminology. Like this year, the Women International Women's Day, their theme is give to gain. And the whole purpose of that is if we give, then the whole world gains.
Hmm.
Everyone gains. But it's part of men and women, entire societies have to get behind that. And we have to recognize again that women's rights are human rights.
They are human rights. And for every girl dad out there, you need to be super engaged. It should concern you even more so that your daughter may not have the same equitable access to things that boys have. And if you think that it's not part of your discussion or part of your responsibility, you're sorely mistaken. You have to step up to the plate because together is where we create that equality. I mean, women, I mean, we're going to keep yelling from the rooftops. There's no doubt about it. And I really am hopeful for future generations like my daughters who are emboldened, who are brave, who are speaking out. But it's also unfortunate that I do see some of the same old discussions starting to come back around in massive ways and popular ways, and I think, oh my, we
Yes.
cannot slide back. So it's time for everybody to wake up, and having those advocates and allies that are men are extremely important in that discussion.
So one of the key things that the UN women's groups are working on is what are the action steps that we can, because it's like you
Mm,
said, we can talk till we're blue in the face, but what are the action steps that we can take? Even one action step can make a difference.
mhm,
Part of what you're talking about is something I think we really, like you said, the elephant in the room
mhm.
is that we need to bring men into these conversations and get collaboration with them to help build up some of these programs and things that we're talking about. But I also believe we have to go back to the schools in the beginning
Mhm.
and teach the boys and the girls the same concepts. Not girls just, not boys just, but together as society, we can make a better, more equitable, and safer society.
Well,
And
let me give you an example quickly that it's United States based, but when I look at our veteran service organizations who have long since been male dominated, leadership has always been male, vernacular has always been centered around men because you always have like the veterans component, and then you had the ladies auxiliary, which were the spouses who were part of the support system, who, by the way, would always like outwork the veterans. They were like really were the ground that those veteran service organizations stood on. And,
yes,
and I don't think anybody would argue with me on that. But as our military population started to shift and we saw and see more and more women, and I hope that we continue to see more and more women in our armed forces, regardless of what's going on, that they knew they needed to shift in order to gain membership. And so it's no longer called the ladies auxiliary, it's called the auxiliary. And so there now are
that's
male
interesting.
spouses that are part of the auxiliary, even
All
here in
right.
Kentucky, but nationally. So when you see organizations that are 100+ years old, where they
Mhm.
see the need, they
Right.
understand, the dynamic, and they went back to the drawing board and said, how can we be more inclusive? And maybe it's in our language. Maybe we're not being very accepting of everyone. And they actually went and they saw the writing on the wall. And they're like, you know what? It's no longer a ladies' auxiliary. It's just an auxiliary where spouses, men and women, can help support their veteran spouse. And now we're seeing female leadership or woman leadership at the top of VSOs. And that gives me hope because those
Right.
are entrenched traditional organizations that take a long time. I mean, they're big ships, and to navigate that takes a
Those
lot.
are
So when
gigantic
I see those
shifts.
gigantic
So those are action
ships,
steps that
I
are
go,
slowly being taken. And
okay.
I thank you
Hmm.
for bringing that to the forefront because I was not aware
Hmm.
that the women's auxiliary is now the auxiliary.
Yes, and
That's very
that's
interesting. I love that.
monumental. And maybe some of our shifts aren't necessarily huge. Maybe
Right.
we start with very simple steps like instead of are you a veteran, have you had prior military service? And I, as a designer, when I think of creating solutions for problems, I first come back to the drawing board and go, okay, what is the problem we're actually trying to solve? And rarely is it through one step you're going to solve everything. And a lot of times it takes a multi step approach,
That's
and you
so
have to
true.
start at the very level building the foundation. And sometimes it is the language and it is the way it's presented, and then it's the mechanism, and then it's the system, and then all of a sudden you've created, change. But it takes managing your expectation on what those steps are. And so many people
Absolutely.
want it overnight. We're in an instant gratification society. Politicians want things overnight. They don't understand collaboration. It's all about the win. And it's not about, we've got to shift our thought process from me to we, where it's not about us right now. It's about our
It,
children in the
it's about
future.
everyone.
It
It really
is, but we've
is.
got to set up a society
I
so our
know.
children have it better than we had it. And right now, we're just so self satisfying. Like, if I'm good today, if the Dow is up today, then everything's okay. And you're like, that absolutely is not true.
And that doesn't work for many, many folks. Seriously. I mean,
That's exactly
you know,
right. We're not thinking
I
about
don't
the
want to,
future when you think that way.
yeah, I don't want to get into politics, so I won't go there.
No, I
But
got you.
I mean, we're the United Nations Association is a nonpartisan group,
Sure. And it should
but
be.
we are working on problems that are created by our politicians. And so
They are,
we
and it's
have,
that generalization, them like
yes,
them thinking, and that's their problem across the board. Them thinking that
right,
like those overarching generics, like if one thing is good, then everything is good. But I
right,
think that's where women come into play more, because we take care and we nurture, and that's our business zone of genius. And we look at everything to determine if the one thing is okay. Whereas the opposite is true, I believe, a lot of times in government. Like, if they create one thing that is elevated, then it elevates everything. And that's just not true. You have to have
right.
elevation across the board. And it's tragic when we don't look at the whole picture, because something will
Well,
fail, something will
I,
break. It's like
you
building
know,
a machine, and you've got, all of these parts, and you only better one part, but you don't like better all the other parts. It's like that machine's going to break.
but you were talking about the managing the expectations.
Hmm.
It's the same thing as a business advisor. Over the years,
Hmm.
I've written business plans, marketing plans, PR things. We really have to look at, you have to start somewhere.
Hmm.
And I want to embolden, I love that word, embolden our women and girls to just start something. Don't say, oh, I have to wait till it's all perfect, because first of all, it will never be perfect.
Just start.
And things are constantly changing, and especially
Hmm.
right now with technology and AI, everything is evolving so quickly. The medical world, the political world, you name it,
Hmm.
manufacturing, the multi manufacturing now that's being done with the, let's talk about it, printers. you know
Sure. Well, I have a lot of our clients, our PR and media clients, that they wait for the website to be perfect. They wait for the PR talking points to be perfect. And as I always tell them, I can't teach you my experience of being on the stage, of speaking before the groups. You just have to start. And as soon as you step on that stage and start speaking, you're going to know immediately whether you love to do this or whether you hate to do this. And as soon as you come off stage, you need to make that determination. And so many of them, once you finally give them a little push and get them out
right,
there, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna feel fear, and that's okay. You're gonna feel like you're gonna throw up, and that's okay. Those nerves are gonna be there. I'll teach you some breathing exercises, but you got to do the thing, because I can't
right.
teach you. I can give you the words, I can give you the performance tips. I can't teach you that experience. Period. You got to get that. And so much of our lives, just like with manufacturing, I mean, think about all the schooling that we've both had
Yeah,
together.
I mean, it's
And let me just tell you, they did not teach me about international business when
oh,
I was
no.
in
Well,
school.
me neither. When I was
Yeah.
buying pallets of things from China for my
International shipping
jewelry,
costs.
yeah, all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
was a whole different world. And I think we have to stop shying away from trying to start something
Hmm.
because inevitably it's going to evolve. I call myself the pivot queen. I've pivoted so many times. My
Sure.
husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. That's why I became a Parkinson's expert. He was diagnosed in 2004 and he just passed in July, but he didn't die from Parkinson's. He died from cancer. The
Mm.
very last 2.5 months of his life, he had a rare form of sarcoma cancer that took him very quickly. And everybody, when they talk to me, they're making the assumption that he died from Parkinson's. And I'm like, no. And they're looking at me like, you're the Parkinson's expert. And I said, yes, I am. But this is a part of life. Things
Hmm.
change and we have to pivot. And as women and girls, and I really want to empower and embolden and inspire women and girls because we have to work together.
Hmm.
And I really am going to keep going back to your program, this wonderful global game changer. I mean, I can't wait to find out more about this. I do want to get to something because International Women's Day is coming, and the theme is Give to Gain, and it highlights a collective power of investing in women and girls. So it affirms that when we expand access to opportunity, care, education, leadership, we strengthen our communities, we improve our health outcomes, and we advance sustainable development goals that were set forward in the UN in 2015. So we're focusing on gender equality and women's human rights, mental health and holistic well-being, education as a human right, and let's think about that,
Hmm.
reimagined leadership models, and intergenerational mentorship and engagement. It's so important for all of us, women, girls, men, and boys, to think about these things for the world to make it a better world. And I want to tell folks a little bit about the Kentucky Division of the United Nations Association. It's part of the United Nations Association, and it's a movement Americans that started because they were dedicated to supporting the United Nations. And it was formed in 1943 by a compassionate group of Americans that were committed to building an organization that could win the peace following World War II. The UNA, which is United Nations Association of the United States of America, played an instrumental role in the creation of the UN Charter, its ratification by the US Congress, and in every chapter of the UN US relationship since the founding of the United Nations. With over 20,000 members, and I would say there's probably more than that, 60% are under the age of 26. There are more than 200 chapters across the United States, and they're united in their commitment to global engagement and belief that each of us can play a part in advancing the UN's mission and achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were set forth by the UN in 2015. So when our listeners are going and looking at the information about this podcast, they'll find a link to the United Nations Association of the Kentucky Division, and they'll find a link to the United Nations Women's Group, and they'll find a link to the United Nations website. We are uploading this podcast and many others on March 8th, which is International Women's Day, and then virtually the United Nations will have a special International Women's Day event on March 5th. So those links will be there. And Heather French Henry will have her information. We'll have that. You'll get to see a picture of her and information, and her bio will be there as well. I hope that you all are enjoying this. We really want to make a difference in the world of women and girls, but we also, again, addressing the elephant in the room, Heather, we really want to bring women and boys into this. And I want to sincerely look back at what can we do from the time that they enter school, boys and girls together, where it's not boys do this and girls do this. We need to work together as a world to make it better because going to war, fighting each other, taking power away, then giving it back, then back and forth, then back and forth, it's not good for the world. And I just want us to move forward. So I want to thank
Well,
you all for being
thank you. I
part. And
appreciate that.
thank you, Heather French Henry, for being here as my guest on Women Empowering Women and Girls. I'm Katherine Autin. You can reach me at KAUTIN at AOL.com. You can always call me 502-314-8307 in Louisville, Kentucky. And Heather French Henry, if you'd like to give your information and let everybody know how to contact you, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Please go to my website at heatherfrenchhenry.com. Again, heatherfrenchhenry.com. If you'd like to reach out to me, there's a contact form on there. But also join me on Instagram. I handle my own social media, and DM me anytime so that we can create a more global conversation to further the legacy of women across the world.
And I'm sure you're on LinkedIn,
I
Facebook.
am. I am. But I will say that of all of my social platforms, I enjoy Instagram a little more. LinkedIn, to me, is, it's still under development to a degree. Facebook, I am on Facebook, no doubt. I don't enjoy Messenger. I'm just going to put it out there because I have several Facebook pages that all have their own Messenger account. But you can also email me at heather@heatherfrenchhenry.com as well. So that contact form comes to that email. Feel free to reach out to me. But yeah, heatherfrenchhenry.com is a great place to start.
Wonderful. So you can reach me. I'm on Facebook and it's KJAUTIN, which is my last name. You can look me up there, Katherine Autin, AUTIN. You can also look at Parkinson Partners and Visionary Caregivers. Those are my two other Facebook pages. And I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Alignable. So
You got to be on
there's
all
a
of
whole
it,
lot
certainly.
there.
Yeah.
And you can check the information about my book. I wrote my book. It's called My Unexpected Detour, Becoming a Parkinson's Expert and Patient Advocate the Hard Way. So I look forward to doing more podcasts. And thank you again so much, Heather French Henry, for being here. It's been wonderful interviewing you. And perhaps we can do some more on this new thing that you were telling me, the global game changers. I want to interview you about that again. So thank you
Absolutely. Would
so,
love to do it.
so, so much. It's been such a pleasure and an honor interviewing you. Thank you.
Thank you.